perspective on that point, I rewatched Punisher Warzone yesterday, and one of the things that just stands out about it is it's a movie that has such a distinct style that
Well,
whether the color scheme.
I can tell you your background lighting is literally like I feel like you hired my DP.
I love to hear that. That's what I was going for. Big, vibrant, bold colors. But you watch the movie, it has a distinct style. It's ultra violent, and it's made for a specific audience. It's not optimized for everyone. And as someone that loves all the Marvel movies, and I grew my channel covering the Marvel Cinematic Universe, at the same time, the directors kind of feel like McDonald's managers, that they're making to whether an algorithm, a formula, a template. I mean, what's kind of your feeling on that tension between filmmaker-driven superhero films and corporate franchise models?
Well, I tell you personally, if I talk to you from a director's point of view and looking at my own career, I wished I had been a Marvel director when I was one of the early ones, right? My movie was still made with Lionsgate and Marvel in collaboration, and Kevin at the time, who ran Marvel, was just new there. So it was at the very beginning. And I felt very strongly I have to leave my own mark and I have to do all of that. And the much smarter ways, if I had insisted and turned Punisher Warzone down, as I did twice, and they kept coming back and talking me into it, I kept telling them multiple times, I didn't grow up with this character. Maybe you should get somebody who's a real fan of this character. And I still think in the end, I did my duty and studied everything about it and gave it a style that I figured represents the comic book. But if I would have just waited and stepped into a time when Marvel became much more, first of all, they don't collaborate anymore, and they are much more like a TV show where they hire directors not to be unique or creative, but to just go with what works for them. I feel like my career would have been much better because I could just show up and, okay, you want me to do this and you want me to do this. That worked out better for all the directors who did that, whereas mine and putting my stamp on and then not having a marketing department that supported me and them bringing it out on Christmas for what reason ever, nobody could ever explain. It killed my career for the longest time. And, then all these other movies came up and then they had this idea, oh, maybe we should hire women directors and when I then saw what some of the directors they brought in, some of them directing martial arts movies, in the Marvel, I'm like, that could have been me if I hadn't just jumped the gun and gotten in so early. So from a career point, I think I made a mistake being one of the early ones. I should have just waited. From a creative point of view, do I think it is creatively fulfilling to make a Marvel movie with such a big budget, but really be like a TV episodical director? No, it's probably not that fulfilling. But the thing about it is that, you make a successful movie like that, there is a lot of jump-off opportunity. Like people give you money to make other things,
Yeah, it's what's interesting to me is like that exact tension there of best for career, best for as the artist, what is satisfying to you. And I don't do you even think a movie like Punisher Warzone could be made today with that level of freedom to make such an intense, brutal film? Like, to me, that's why it stands the test of time. That's why I think history's been very kind to it, because it actually stands out as a unique thing that captured the Punisher comic books. It feels like Welcome Back, Frank and Punisher Max and all of that versus other ones that feel kind of more bland.
Well, I think it's interesting because, as a filmmaker, you can see kind of in the residual checks when your movie that is like it's almost 20 years old at some point, the residual checks, instead of becoming less, become more. It's almost like new generations keep like discovering this, and becoming fans. And then suddenly I'm getting emails from people and I'm like, but you were like 8 when that movie came out. How do you even know about? But there is definitely like people are finding it and saying, oh my God, how did you manage to do this? And, I didn't do anything special other than insist that I will have my own style. If we're making it and I'm making it in the way that I think this would be enjoyable, which really, to be honest, was in a manner that represented the comic book to a T, because
Right.
I had read the
Right.
critique of the previous movies, and the biggest one of the one right before was that it was way too PG-13, way too daylight. They said this didn't remind us of any comic books we read. You know, it was too comedic, it was too this. And I watched it and I was like, yeah, I can see that, because the comic book is very dark and very brutal. And if there is comedy, it's like some guy has another person's balls in his cup that they were cut off. Like, that's the kind of humor the Punisher
Yeah.
has, right? And so I thought, you know what I really have to do here is follow this comic book that the people love, especially the run that they love. And then comic books have a way, they really have only a few colors, because of it's too expensive
Right.
to put, 10 colors into one panel. And while that's not expensive necessarily in movies, it's the way to imitate that, to give you that comic book look, is
Yeah.
to have fewer colors represented, like you right now. I mean, that is a perfect comic book panel, right? And it is. It's beautiful, and also it looks beautiful if it's done well, like you have done here. It's always stunning. But my DP and we watched Blade Runner all the time, because that already had that look without being based on a comic book.
Yeah. One final question. One thing I noticed when the credits started on Punisher Warzone is that Pat Johnson was the stunt coordinator. And I guess I read that you worked on the Mortal Kombat 90s tour, that I believe he was the stunt coordinator on that. Was there a direct correlation there? Or
he was also the stunt coordinator on Batman and Robin, which I also worked on. But Joel Schumacher ended up firing me and replacing me with a guy, which was very funny. There was a gang I don't know if you remember the scene, there was this gang with the whip chains, and I ended up having to teach all the guys in that gang the whip chain, because nobody but me actually knew how to do it. And then Shoemaker had this specific look for which we needed contacts, because the eyes needed to be dark light, kind of glowing. And unfortunately, I had real trouble getting these contacts in. My eye kept rejecting them. So, they said, let's fire her and replace her with a guy, which I thought was very mean. And the lead guy in the gang ended up writing me this beautiful note, said, I'm so sorry, don't worry about it. I got fired too many times. You'll get over it. This is just the beginning of your career, ta-da-da. And I always remember that, how kind that guy was. And he ended up playing LBJ in Punisher Warzone. And he didn't even know that it was me. I ended up saying, I said, I am a huge fan of your work, but also you wrote me a card years ago. And he was just, so surprised. And Pat Johnson hired me for multiple things. He was a famous stunt coordinator. And, there's a lot of stuff you do as a stunt woman that nobody knows. Like, you don't get credit for, it didn't go. But he had a regular history of hiring me, and then I hired him on Green Street Hooligans as my fight choreographer, and hired him again on Punisher Warzone. And I think he's retired now. Otherwise, I would have certainly called him for this one as well.
Oh, very cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. Like I said, you made a movie that checked all the right boxes for me to be like, oh, that's on my radar. And as someone that just longs for original films, and then one that's in so many categories that I'm interested in, was like, I got to check that one out. And just wanted to talk with you about the film and comic book movies, the industry and everything.
Oh, this was very joyful. I'm sad that we didn't have time to talk about your Bible degree.
Oh, yeah.